I'm so sorry you had to see that. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. Well, my name is John Hand. I'm the site leadership pastor here at the Meeting House, and I have the honor of working with our location pastors, our site pastors across the Meeting House. And it is good to be back with you. And that was horrible, what you just had to endure watching. That has to actually be the worst and the best 80s workout video I have ever seen. I am a child of the 80s, parachute pants. My parents had a Thigh Master, remember that? I'm from the States, and so I have come to expect this ridiculousness from there. So tell me, please, that in Canada, you guys didn't make stuff like this. Please, don't pop my bubble. So last week we were together and we were looking at kind of a two-part mini-series. We started last week with, what does it mean for us to be the church in a post-Christian culture? In this cultural moment, what does it mean to be the church? And today I want to look at something that's actually a bit more individual. It's more kind of on a me and God level, which is more like, what kind of person do we need to become, or people do we need to become in this cultural moment that we find ourselves in? The reason why I chose this horrible 80s workout video is because while people are doing this aerobic terribleness, is that a word? Aerobic terribleness, is that a word? While they were doing that, something's happening in their body. Something's happening internally. This week I was with my friend Matt Collins, who's one of our pastors here at Ancaster. And Matt walked up to where I was, and he was shuffling and walking like this and wincing, like he was in recovery from being hit by a car or something like that. And so I said, Matt, are you okay? Because you don't look okay. And all he could say was two words: CrossFit. He had been doing CrossFit. And because he had been doing CrossFit the day before, when he woke up that morning, he was not actually able to put his pants on by himself. He actually needed help getting in his car. Why? Because if you know exercise science at all, you know that something was happening in his body. His muscles were breaking down. He was actually tearing them. And as his body rests overnight, they were reforming. His muscles were actually reforming. They were actually transforming into a stronger, more sore, painful version of himself. You know, as a culture, we tend to celebrate these kinds of transformations. We watch these kind of makeover shows where you have somebody who's out of shape and maybe has put on too much weight, and then they go through a diet regime and exercise and blood, sweat, and tears, and then they're like all ripped and like their physique is like that of a Greek god or something like that. We love this stuff. But I think in our cultural moment that we live in, I wonder if we spend more time focusing on the transformation that takes place out here than on the conditioning and the shaping and the transforming of what takes place like in here. Like not in our muscles, but like in our motives, like in our deeper desires, in our attitudes, in those parts of our inner character. In the Christian tradition that the Meeting House is a part of, there's a process for this transformation that facilitates this inner change in us, and it's called spiritual formation. Maybe some of you are familiar with this term of spiritual formation. It's like going to the gym for your soul. It's like a workout that's meant to shape and change and transform us by Jesus over time. Maybe for some of you, this is a new term, spiritual formation. What is this really about? So I want to define it for us as we kind of start, because we're going to talk about this the rest of our time together. So spiritual formation, in partnership with God, we engage in a process of intentionally forming our inner thoughts, motivations, attitudes, and desires to become like like Jesus over time. Notice here that it's a partnership. So in partnership with God, this isn't just about me gutting it out and me self-improving and changing myself. It's in partnership with God, but it's also not God kind of, showering us with magic transformation dust. Like, this is a partnership where God's doing something, we're doing something in our willingness, in our openness, and something then deeper is taking place. And so I want to look at a passage this morning that gives us a picture of how this happens and how this works out in our life. And we're going to look at the book of Romans. And for some of you, maybe you're new to faith, and so you're like, book of Romans, what is this about? Well, the book of Romans is in the New Testament, and it's actually not a book, it's a letter. And this letter was written to the first Christians at Rome. And we're going to look at chapter 12, and I would love for you, if you want, to put your hand up if you don't have a Bible, and an usher will give you a Bible. You can read along with us. If you're at one of our regional sites, would love for you to grab a Bible as well, and you can go to kind of the entrance of the theater where you came in, and there's usually a stack of Bibles there. So in this letter, Paul is writing to these early Christians who are in the heart of the Roman Empire, and he's writing to them about this life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Like, Jesus lived and he taught, and then he was killed by violent hatred, dark forces. But he didn't stay dead, because God's love overpowers even death itself. And so this 11 chapters is about this mysterious resurrection and the implications that it has for us. Now, some of you might say, resurrection? Like people coming back from the dead? Like a zombie movie or something? Like this doesn't happen. Resurrection doesn't happen, right? And I want to say it certainly doesn't happen often that I'm aware of. But followers of Jesus were kind of crazy. And we believe that Jesus rose from the dead. And what's even more mysterious is as we encounter this mystery, it changes us. And so I understand if you think it's odd, but something happened in the scriptures. There were those who encountered, who saw the risen Christ, and it changed who they were, and they went on to proclaim this reality, and it began to change the world. So this leads us to the doorstep of chapter 12. So if we could read it, starting in verse 1. Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is true worship. Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and then you will be able to prove and test what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. I think it's interesting. In verse 2, it talks about being conformed. Do not be conformed to the world. And the word here for world is in the Greek language, which the New Testament was written in, is aion. And it's actually a word that describes more than just the world. It describes more of this age that we find ourselves in, that they found themselves in. It's more of the age, the pattern of this world. The world we live in is beautiful. You can see the fingerprints of God all over the world. But the world we live in is also dark. And there are forces in this world that are working and conspiring to shape and change and form and conform us to the pattern of this age. And so this passage says, well, instead of that, why don't we not do that? Instead, be transformed by Jesus. And the word transformed in the Greek here is metamorphao. It's this word to change or to take a different shape. Think about like metamorphosis. And when you break metamorphao down into its different parts, so you have this metamorphao to change the shape and form. So how many of you like sci-fi movies with shapeshifters? And then when you add meta to it, it means to be with. So it's this idea of changing one's form after being with. How many times have you been with somebody and their love for you or their friendship was so encouraging, their positive attitude was so uplifting, that at the end of that time with them, like, you've changed form. Like, you are happier, you're more content, you feel better because you changed your form after being with those people. In the book of Acts, in chapter 4, it describes these ragtag fishermen who have no status in their culture. And it says these uneducated disciples of Jesus, the only way to explain the courage that they had and the power that they had must be that they have been with Jesus. It changed their form. It was changing who they were, because we're all in the process of changing. So another way to look at spiritual formation might be that it's the process of changing our form to become Christian. Often we will pray a prayer, give our lives to Jesus, get baptized, and we become a Christian, and that's good. But spiritual formation is the process of becoming Christian, becoming like Jesus over time, because we're all becoming. You're sitting in this room right now, and you are becoming as you sit here. Becoming what? I don't know. I think about my morning this morning. Becoming what? Becoming joyful, becoming thankful, maybe becoming resentful, maybe becoming anxious, maybe becoming prideful or happy or content or worried or hangry. We're all becoming something. When you look at who you are today, you are sitting here as the culmination of the thoughts that you've had, the choices you've made, the desires that you've cultivated, the things that you've loved. You are the culmination of all of those things in your life, and they all culminate to make you who you are right now. But who you are right now is also determining who you're going to become in 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 15 years from now, by the attitudes that you have, the desires that you cultivate, the things that you love, the patterns of thinking that you hold on to. We're all in the process of becoming. And I think the question for us is, what are we becoming? What are we becoming? The process of transformation comes from exercising our spiritual muscles, of having them torn, kind of broken down, and then reformed as we are with Jesus. Being with Jesus is what reforms us, reforms and shapes us on the inside. And so we become like what we pursue. If you pursue Jesus, you become like Jesus. Now, in this cultural moment that we find ourselves in, it's interesting because culture, we have, what we said last week, culture does not agree upon what is the purpose of life. And so the purpose of life is, what am I pursuing? What do I pursue? And for many in our culture in this moment, many pursue happiness. Like, that is the purpose of life, to be happy. And that sounds good. But have you ever tried to be happy? Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been frustrated and unhappy trying to be happy and stay happy. It's very difficult. And so this passage says, don't be conformed to the spirit of the age, because Jesus comes along and he says, oh, I have a pursuit for you. I have a purpose for you. It's to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Oh, and while you're at it, love your neighbor as yourself. And so the question is, how do we then not be conformed to the pattern of this world? Are there any self-acknowledged nonconformists in the room? 3. Great. The rest of you are protesting by not raising your hand because you are all nonconformists too. That sounded funnier when I said it in my head than it did coming out loud. Anyway, this is what I love about our Anabaptist faith tradition, because our Anabaptist faith tradition is full of people who are nonconformist. They said, we're not going to be defined by the pattern of this age. And instead, we're going to be transformed. And verse 2 says, by how? By the renewing of our minds. And I think this is an interesting term, this renewing of the mind, because it means to be built up. Like to take something that's broken and old and to build it up or to renovate it. Like when you're working out at the gym and someone says, hey, how you doing? What's going on? You can say, well, I'm just doing some reno on the bod. Because you're breaking it down, you're taking something old and you're building it back up. You're renovating it. The root of this word means to cause to grow, to make something grow. It's interesting. Do you think that Paul, in the first century, when he's writing this under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, do you think he knew about neuroplasticity? Do you think that he knew what we now know today? That we're learning today that the brain has this ability to learn and to unlearn. That you can reshape your brain, that your brain is actually shaping into new patterns and new behavior, new ways of thinking. And I think this is encouraging because Paul, in the genius of divine revelation, he's pointing at something that Christians have known for 2,000 years that science is now catching up to. And that is that we are not stuck as we are today. I mean, how many times have you felt this? You feel like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Neuroscience says yes. Spiritual formation, this transformation says yes. How many times have you found yourself really hating parts of you that you wish you could change, and you keep doing that thing again and again, and you feel stuck in this rut, and you can't seem to break out? And neuroscience and our understanding of Jesus means you are not stuck. There is so much hope for your ongoing transformation. But how? How do we do it? So a spiritual writer that I follow, Richard Rohr, he says of transformation, he says, we do not think our way into new ways of living. We actually live our way into new ways of thinking. Ooh. So for the last 2,000 years, Christianity has developed practices that help us live our way into new ways of thinking. And I want to share a couple of them with you this morning. I want to share 3 of them with you. And these are ways that you can try to experience facilitating deeper transformation in your life. Not all of these will work for you, but some of them may. We're all very different people. So let's look at the practice of fasting. Fasting? Really? What is this, like the 1600s? Fasting? Yep. Fasting. So fasting is something that the early church did. In fact, we find in Jesus assumed that his disciples would be fasting. You can see some passages there in your notes that kind of point at Jesus' understanding of this fasting. Now, fasting can be from food, it can be from people, it can be from substances, it can be from your phone, God forbid, my precious. It can be from anything that you begin to recognize is actually distracting you from relying on the love that God has for you. Because human nature finds things to rely on. We all rely on something. We rely on people. We look to people to do for us what only God can do. So we look to people for unconditional love, and we look to people for affirmation, and we look to people to be consistent and steadfast in our life. But the problem is that as much as we love people, they tend to let us down. And we forgive them. Or we look to other things, good things like our work. We rely on our work. And so for some of us, my hand's up on this has been my struggle in the past, that our work is not just about earning money. Our work is about trying to earn our worth. It's about trying to find a significance in us that makes us feel like we're actually worthy. But when we look at work as a place to rely on to find our worth, we find over time that it lets us down. Because the only thing actually, like, in all of human history that has seemed to be the consistent thing that we can actually rely on that doesn't let us down, that we can go to for our security and our purpose and our worth and our significance, is the love of God in Christ, is God's love for us, because God's love for you will not let you down. God's love for you doesn't always do what you want, but it never lets us down. And so in this fasting, my wife and I, we don't do it as a way to, work off guilt. We're not doing it as some kind of way to earn cosmic brownie points with God or get off the bad list. It's not about that. It's actually about freedom. But it is a workout. There's one thing in life that's universal in the way that we relate to God, which is I'm probably going to be closer to God and more like God the more aware of my need for Him that I am. And fasting is something that puts us in touch with this need that we have, this deeper need that we have in our lives for God. So, often in our North American experience, God feels distant. You ever experience that? God feels like He's in the other room somewhere, like a distant uncle somewhere off there, out there somewhere. I think that this is often because we have so much abundance in this world. Like, we have so much that helps to distract us and helps us to feel like we actually don't need God. We don't need His power, His presence, His deeper love and transformation in our lives. And so fasting is about getting us in touch with our deeper need for God and our need for His presence in our life right now, like in this room. And so every year, Amy and I, during Lent, my wife and I, we fast from something that we don't really talk about here much at the meeting house. And so I want to go there, and I'm not going there to shame anybody, and I'm not going there to brag. But we fast from alcohol. And alcohol can be a touchy subject. But I think it's important that we just kind of name this. So we fast from alcohol. Part of our experience as people is that we look to different things to help us kind of cope with the stress of life. There's oftentimes maybe three areas or three ways that we try to do this. One way would be that we maybe numb. So we have stress, we have anxiety, we kind of numb ourselves through alcohol and drugs. Another way might be that we try to fill ourselves through food and shopping and relationships, or we try to thrill ourselves through sex and porn and adventure. And some of these are really good things. Sex is good. Food, it's helpful, right? Kind of can't live without it. These are adventure, shopping, these are good things. But when these things become something that I look to escape my life, they become bad things. For me, sometimes, alcohol, even in moderation, can be something that I go to kind of kick back, relax. Maybe you have a hard day at work, and you come home. And this is theoretical because I work at the meeting house, and we never have hard days at work at the meeting house. You come home, and maybe the kids are fighting. It's a little stressful, and so, there's some anxiety, there's some stress, and it would just be kind of easy to go kind of check out with a drink and just, relax, escape it. And so we purposely choose to not do that. We purposely choose to say, okay, I'm not going to go to that place where I might go try to relax and escape. And instead, I'm going to take that energy and I'm going to steer that back into relying on God. Relying on the strength that has been there the whole time, but I'm not actually accessing it because I'm going this other way. And so now I'm living out of touch with the real need in my life. And what's the real need in my life, the real need in my life is that I actually need I need his love. Because while I'm fasting, I'm also reflecting. And you know what I find when I'm reflecting? I find that there's a deeper thing. Why am I so stressed out at times? Why am I anxious? What's going on? And I look underneath the surface and I find an uninspected belief in my life. And I find this belief, and the belief says, John Hand's in control. But I'm not. But when I believe that I'm in control, now anything that comes in my path is now a barrier to me getting what I want. And what does that produce? Anxiety and anger and stress. And so the deeper thing that's going on that I need in my life is like I need release from my fear, because I'm actually afraid, and if I can be in control, then I won't be so afraid. And so in fasting, I discover these things, and I discover actually what I really need in my life is I need to live in the awareness of God's love for me, because that is the safest place I could ever be, no matter what's happening. Because that's the promise. The promise is not God's going to fix your life. The promise is I will give you my love. I will give you my life. I will give you transformation. And that's enough. That's what he promises. Because it's hopeful. Think about it in your life right now. The gospel of Jesus says that you already have everything that you ultimately need. What do you ultimately need in your life? You need the love of God. And the gospel of Jesus says you already have it. You don't need to go look in other places to find what you already have. You already have it. Spiritual formation then is the process of how I wake up to this. How is it that I wake up to the love of God that I already have in my life, that I don't need to find in some other place by escaping the life that I currently have right now? So here's a question. What area of life do you need the love of Jesus to fill in you? What deeper area of your life, what deeper thing, if you were honest with yourself, would say, I actually need the love of Christ in that place? So that was fasting. Number 2, as a spiritual practice, is this idea of ordinary intention. So how do we turn something ordinary in our life into a spiritual practice? And so what is it in your life that you already do that you can intentionally, on purpose, do as a spiritual practice? One example of this would be yoga. I talked about yoga last week a little bit. And so yoga, here you have a place of prayer as a spiritual practice. It's a place to center on and practice releasing your fear and your control and your anxieties to Jesus. Not to some impersonal force in the universe, but you steer those anxieties and you steer those energies into releasing those prayers and that anxiety and receiving faith from Jesus that overcomes your fear. It's a practice. You do this over time. You don't see results at first, but you do this over time and through repetition. You're forming new neurological pathways and spiritual pathways, and over time you begin to experience a deeper transformation. But where does this take place? Spiritual transformation actually takes place not in the big and the bold, but actually in the ordinary things. It's often in the very ordinary aspects of life that we experience transformation. Because where do you live most in your life? Do you live mostly on vacation? No, you live in the ordinary. You go to work, you sit in traffic, you wash dishes, you take the kids to sports, you hang out with your family. It's in the ordinary things of life. It's in the ordinary things of life where we, through intentionality, we purpose to make a shift here. I'm going to change my attitude here. I'm going to forgive this person over here. I need to set down this anxiety and trust here. It's in the little, ordinary, micro decisions that over the course of our life lead to our transformation. Another way to say it is we don't typically ooze our way into Christ-likeness. We choose our way into Christ-likeness. I also want to say it's about intention. It's not about discipline. It does take discipline, but for a lot of us who've been raised in church, we've heard about spiritual disciplines, and I think I get it. But oftentimes with spiritual disciplines, we think that we just have to gut it out. I just need to work harder. I just need to pray more. And actually, this is not about that. This is not about us shoulding on ourselves, right? We should on ourselves. I should be praying more. I should be giving more. I should be less angry. I should. And I just want to say, you don't experience transformation by shoulding on yourselves. What you do experience transformation is when you say, I am going to choose to be intentional with how I live my life in the ordinary, to be shaped and formed in the guts of ordinary life. The third practice is that of gratitude. So when my wife and I were a little bit younger, in our early 30s, we were in a bad spot. We went to counseling. She was going her way. I was going my way. I was trying to find my worth in my work, trying to be a super pastor of a church. And she was finding her worth in our kids, and we were going like this. What scared us is we were starting to lose respect for each other. And once you lose respect in a relationship, it's very hard to get it back. And so we went to a spiritual guide, a counselor who said, I want to help you. Are you willing? We said yes. He said, I want you to try this practice. I want you to try to thank each other for what you do. I said, I just paid $120 for you to tell my wife thank you. Really? Yes. And so we started it. We started the spiritual practice of gratitude. We started thanking each other. Dishes, put the kids to bed. Thank you for work. Thank you that you go to work. Thank you for vacuuming. Thank you for cleaning that toilet. Thank you for making the salad. We just started thanking each other, being very intentional. Now, at first, did we want to? No. I did not feel thankful for my wife. She did not feel thankful for me. We had been drifting apart. Over time, we started doing this, and as we did it more and more and more, guess what happened? We developed this desire to want to spend time together again. Hearing each other express this gratitude began to melt our hearts, and we went from going this way, and we started coming this way together. And it was through the repetitious, boring, ordinary practice of gratitude. It's hard, if you think about gratitude. I challenge you to try it. It's hard for us to be anxious, to be resentful, to be worried, to be controlling, to be angry when we're thankful. In fact, I would say it's almost impossible. The third, or that was the third. Okay. I wish we had more time to do a fourth and a fifth and a sixth. I wish we had more time to talk more about these spiritual practices. In your home church notes and in your sermon notes, there's a list of them. I encourage you to go check them out and maybe learn more about these practices. But before we shut her down, I just want to give you a few pointers in transformation. A few pointers in transformation. When it comes to transformation, you have to be completely honest with yourself. And for many of us, this is the hardest part of spiritual formation, because it's easier for us to learn more information about Jesus. It's easier for us to read another book than it is for us to be shaped by Jesus. And the reason why it's hard for us to be shaped by Jesus is because it actually means that we have to ask ourselves some really tough questions and be really honest with ourselves. You won't become Christian, Christ-like, without this. I think this is why Paul in the first verse was saying, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. And this isn't meant to be masochistic. It's actually saying there's a death involved here. There's a real shot. There's a real death to your ego. There's a death to our self-deceptions and our self-justifications. And it does require a sacrifice of ego, of pride, a humbling so that I can be honest with myself and with God and with other people. How honest are you with yourself? There's a pointer on this, which is you probably are not as honest with yourself as you think you are. And so we probably have to ask other people to give us some reflection on our lives. So what would it look like for you to go to somebody in your life and say, are there any blind spots in my life that you think are keeping me from living a Christ-like life in some area or aspect? What would it look like if you did that? If you actually went to somebody and said, do you see any blind spots in my life that are keeping me from becoming like Jesus? And you don't even have to be a Christian to do this. If you're just exploring faith, you can go to someone in your life, a trusted person, and say, is there anything that you see in my life that you would say is a blind spot that I need to work on to become a better version of myself? I dare you to do this. I double dog dare you to do this. It's difficult, and there's a reason why a lot of people do not experience a deeper transformation because of this point. The second one is, have you ever tried to speak a foreign language? Have you ever started a workout routine? It's fun at first, and then it gets really hard, and you want to give up. And it gets really awkward, and it's really difficult. And it's not until it starts feeling awkward and difficult that you know that you're actually making progress, right? So spiritual practices, they will always feel weird to you starting out. They will feel awkward, and that's one of the ways that you know it's actually working. How fun is that? They feel uncomfortable, right? Unused muscles they're sore after a workout, and so you push through. You embrace the suck. The reason that you need transformation in that aspect of your life is because you've not been cultivating transformation in that aspect of your life. It takes about, 4 to 6 weeks for a spiritual practice to begin to kind of be not as awkward. And at first you don't see results, just like when you go to the gym, you don't see results. But over time, micro decisions, little choices, intention, we begin to experience a new way being born in our life. Side note to people who are new to faith. I want to invite you on this journey too. Maybe you're saying, I don't know, I'm not there, I don't know what I believe and all this stuff. And I hear that, but I just want to say that faith is sometimes more learned in the gym than it is in the lab. And so it takes oftentimes a trying on or a stepping into this life of faith for you to begin to really understand. And so I invite you, if you don't read the Bible, try reading it and then ask really good, annoying questions to the Christians in your life. Freak them out. Or if you don't pray, start to talk to God as if God is a loving, personal being who's interested in your life. Hang out with other Christians who are having conversations. I think over time you'll find that you are actually becoming more aware of God in your life and more aware of your need for Him. But the last thought I want to leave you with is this. It is that your transformed life is God's gift to you. He's waiting to give it to you. And your transformed life is your gift to the world. When people look back on your life, they're probably not going to say, I wish they had just a nicer car. I wish they planned more dream vacations. They're probably going to say, I wish they were more forgiving. I wish they were more patient. I wish they weren't so controlling. Or maybe they'll say, I could care less about how much they had in the bank account because they were so patient. Like they just loved me unconditionally. I was a nightmare, and they just loved me. They just journeyed with me. They were so kind. When it came to conflict, they gently steered into it, and they didn't avoid it. Our relationship is solid. I think that's what people want from you. I know that's what people want from you. I know that's your greatest gift to the world. We live in a cultural moment where people focus more on the outside than on the inside. They focus more on image and appearances than they focus on patience and forgiveness. The world needs your transformed life. Jesus is waiting to transform you. He's just waiting for you. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you that we could be together, that this message is so important, it's so needed in this world, that you would transform us through our willingness and our partnership with you, that we would enter practices that stretch us and break down our spiritual muscles, that form new neurological pathways and spiritual pathways for us to live fuller and more alive and more free and more love and more like you. This world needs us. You gifted us. Now may we go and live this imperfectly in your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great week.
Hi, I'm Bruxy. Thanks for tracking with the Meeting House teaching. If you want to see more videos by us, just click right here. If you want to see what our youth and our kids are learning, you click here. And if you want to be notified anytime we post a new video to make sure you don't miss a teaching, then you subscribe by clicking right here. Thanks again for tracking with us.